Hello, this is the Landscape Ontario podcast. My name is Scott Barber. Today I'm joined by Jay Remsik from WSPS. That's the Workplace Safety and Prevention Services. Jay joins the show to talk about compliance tips for COVID-19 inspections. This is something here in the spring of 2021 that's obviously incredibly important. There are a lot of Ministry of Labor training and skills development inspectors out there. We want to make sure you're doing everything you can to keep your employees safe and the public safe. The episode is coming up next. So Jay, I'm going to start really general here and just ask you, what are some of the things that business owners should be thinking about when it comes to being compliant with safety regulations right now?
Yeah, Scott, I think one of the first things that business owners need to understand and realize is that, when we went into or coming out of the lockdown, the first lockdown that occurred in December, that now it is a requirement to ensure that all businesses have a COVID-19 safety plan in place. And that plan needs to be communicated to their employees. To their staff. It's highly recommended that the plan be posted in an area that it is visible to all staff members. And if the operation does have if there's a requirement to have a health and safety representative or a joint health and safety committee, that plan should be reviewed with the health and safety rep as well as the joint health and safety committee, primarily the worker representative on the committee.
So why don't we talk about what that plan looks like? What are the types of things that need to be included in that plan?
When we look at a COVID-19 safety plan, some of the things or whatever that we need to ensure that are in there is, how are we going to communicate? How are we going to communicate to ensure that all workers are aware of this plan? And this not only goes for both our workers, but for some of the businesses that we could be referring to, such as the nurseries. How are we communicating that to our customers? And then keep in mind as well, if we're bringing in contractors, we need to ensure that is going to be communicated to them. Screening is another big aspect of the safety plan, and whether it's passive in regards to signage or whether it's active screening. And I've noticed that some of the places where I've been out, it is an active screening questionnaire in the form of a paper checklist, or a lot of operations now are using a QR code. But one of the things that I would highly recommend to businesses is don't just take for granted that the workers are actually filling it out. We want to ensure that someone is checking that to ensure that, on a daily basis, if they have implemented screening procedures, that there is someone within the operation that is checking that to ensure that all workers are regularly conducting that, but then determining whether or not there's any issues in regards to the screening questionnaire. We want to think about physical distancing from preventing a transmission. What have you put in place in regards to, for some businesses, ventilation and airflow? I know for the landscapers, they're all going to be working outside, but if possible, if it is a nursery, a nursery or a garden center, could we open up the windows to ensure that we're maximizing the airflow within there? Regular hand sanitizing stations to ensure, and washing of the hands, as well as what types of PPE are required. We do realize that if we can't maintain that 6 feet, that physical distancing, that there is a requirement to ensure that we're wearing some type of face covering or a mask, and that needs to be communicated to our staffs. As well, we hope that there's not going to be a suspected or a positive COVID-19 case, but what are we doing in regards to communicating self-isolation procedures for those workers that could become infected with COVID-19 and other workers that may have been working within close proximity to them. As well, dealing with other risks. And one of the things that we highly recommend is to conduct a COVID-19 hazard identification risk assessment to determine where are the high concentrations or high areas where COVID-19 could be present. And in doing so, by conducting that risk assessment, you'll be able to prioritize and identify where those areas are, and then hopefully put controls in place. So one example that I've noticed throughout the pandemic is that a lot of operations, if it's possible, they're attempting to conduct, for example, training sessions virtually, as opposed to on site, and having an outsider come in to the workplace where there could be the potential aspect of transmission of COVID-19. And then finally, keeping them on top of this, as we know that it's constantly changing, learning and adapting in regards to new policies and procedures, and highly recommended to your first course of action is obviously to follow public health, but the local health unit. All local health units within the province of Ontario, there's different requirements, so that is the best place to find the most pertinent information for your particular area, as well as administrative labor training and skills development in our organization, Workplace Safety and Prevention Services.
That's fantastic. How about, Jay, what are some ways in which employers, business owners can really get buy-in from their employees? It's one thing to, have the plan. You talked a little bit about the communicating and training part, but what advice would WSPS have in terms of actually getting that buy-in and making sure everybody is on board with all the measures that need to be taken?
I think the most important thing is, as was mentioned earlier, Scott, is to have that constant communication with the staff, to keep them updated and abreast of the ever-changing situation. But one of the other things, too, that I think the workers need to understand, and this could be conducted during those communication sessions or tailgate talks that could be occurring at the particular operation. But it is a legal duty and responsibility of a worker in the province of Ontario under the Occupational Health and Safety Act that if an employer puts a specific policy, procedure, a rule in place, it is that worker's responsibility to ensure that he or she is adhering to that policy. And on top of that, from a supervisor standpoint, that if they were to see, for example, a worker that was not maintaining that 6 feet of that physical distancing and they weren't wearing their face covering, it's that supervisor's responsibility to go up to that worker and remind him or her that they're not adhering to the policy, they're not meeting legislative requirements, and that they need to put that mask on. And as well, just recently, I was at a garden center nursery / landscaping operation, and one of the workers asked when I was conducting the session, what was the Ministry of Labor's take on the face coverings and practicing the physical distancing, and he had the assumption that the inspectors were out and about visiting work sites, and just if they found a worker that was not wearing the face covering and was not maintaining the physical distancing, that the inspectors were automatically ticketing that worker. And I explained to him that during this time, during the pandemic, the system partner, the Ministry of Labor, Training and Skills Development inspectors, when they're out there, it's more a proactive approach, and it's about information and awareness, and that if they happen to see that, they're not necessarily going to be ticketing the worker, but they're going to be advising, they're going to be warning the worker, you need to put that mask on. And if it was to occur, a second time, or it was a second time offense, that's potentially where the inspector could issue a ticket to the worker. So from a buy-in standpoint, as I had mentioned, that constant communication, but if employers were to, inform their workers that if they're not adhering to the legislative requirements, to the health unit requirements in regards to COVID-19, that worker actually could be getting the ticket. So hopefully that's going to act as a deterrent, and the worker would provide that buy-in, because it's not going to be the employer's responsibility to pay that monetary fine. It would be the workers.
Right. That's interesting. That's something I actually didn't know. So that's definitely important. I guess, I assume, and maybe I shouldn't assume, that, with everything that's going on, and, we're obviously in the third wave here in Ontario, speaking to you in early April. Are there more Ministry of Labor training and skills development officials out there on the ground, so to speak, doing inspections now than there would be in a typical April, springtime?
Scott, the easy answer is yes. And to give you a definitive number, I don't have that, but I do know that last year that the ministry had ramped up in the hiring of inspectors, and that is their primary focus for businesses that are open right now, that they are visiting operations. It could be going to a garden center, it could be going to a nursery, it could be showing up on site at a landscaping, off-site, work location, and ensuring that those employees, right, that employer is following and adhering to, protocols that have been put in place in regards to COVID-19. And again, they're out there to provide that awareness. And from a guidance standpoint, that's where they would be directing that particular employer to their designated health and safety association. In this particular case, in speaking with you in Landscape Ontario, the landscapers, as was mentioned, the horticultural operations in the province of Ontario, their designated health and safety association is WSPS. And we would be able to provide that guidance. But that being said, from an awareness standpoint, if an employer was not adhering, did not have a safety plan, for example, did not have a required health and safety representative or a joint health and safety committee, that inspector is going to be issuing an order. Then it becomes the employer's responsibility to comply with that order to ensure that they're adhering to the legislative requirements.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Jay, is there anything, I mean, we haven't covered? It's just sort of covering some of these basics about things business owners in the landscape and horticulture industry should be thinking about. But is there anything that you'd like to touch on that we haven't gone over already?
One of the things, that I'd like to probably stress to those employers, in particular with the season ramping up and we're bringing in new employees. What are they doing, or have you considered, training those workers? Not just in regards to COVID-19, but other rules and procedures that need to be followed and that need to be adhered to. We also need to consider, in regards to doing those training sessions, pre-COVID, we might have been able to do, one session with close to 25 to 30 workers in a particular room. We might have to map that out now and say there's no possible way that we can get 30 people into our specific training room and being able to maintain physical distancing. I may have to, or the employer may have to do 3 sessions or 2 sessions just to ensure that we can put people into that room or into that area and then maintain that physical distancing as well. Example, just did 2 Saturdays ago. In an operation, and previously I'd be the one that would be passing out the attendance sheet and getting them to print their name and provide a signature. In this particular case, we had set it up prior to that as they come in, these were the workers that were coming in. They had been instructed by the employer, ensure that when you arrive on Saturday, you bring your own pen, and following them completing the screening questionnaire before they could enter the particular building. Then they were instructed to have the pen they had brought, and then they were signing it individually on the attendance sheet, just to alleviate having to pass out that attendance sheet and then having to sanitize the pen for each particular employee that was going to be signing it.
That's really great info, Jay. I appreciate that. And where can our listeners, Landscape Ontario members, where can they find WSPS resources? Where should they be looking, would you suggest?
I would go on to either Google or Chrome. I would punch in WSPS.ca. Once you get to the landing page, there is a tab function that says resources. You could click on that, and then there are numerous amounts of free downloads. I like to refer to them as tailgate sheets or tailgate talks. And that employer could download that particular tailgate sheet on, for example, let's say heat stress, or there's other guidance documents in and around COVID-19. So we put one together last year from the direction of the ministry in regards to landscaping workers in Ontario and COVID-19 things that an employer should consider. The other thing too that I would say though, Scott, is if the employer was to use one of those downloads, those tailgate talks, very important to keep that tailgate talk on file. They would do their own internal attendance sheet, put down the date that they were going to be doing it. So it was going to be May 16th. I'm doing the session in the morning from 7 o'clock until let's say 7:30. Have every worker sign, determining whether or not they bring their own pen or you're going to sanitize in between. But then on top of that, once they've got the attendance sheet completed, just take that tailgate talk and then staple it to the attendance sheet, keep that on file. In the event, if the minister was to show up and say, did you communicate this, or did you provide any type of orientation or training to your staff members? That employer can say, yes, I did. I did it on this day. Here's the attendance sheet. That's the proof that everybody was in attendance. And here's the resource, the content that we used. We'd use one of the tailgate sheets from WSPS.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Jay. I appreciate your time to explain this, all of these things right now. It's obviously timing for our profession, and really appreciate it.
No problem, Scott. Thanks very much.